All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour. It is 2 o'clock Eastern. So we are going to we're going to advance the slides and get the show on the road. So I want to officially welcome everyone to today's Lunch with Haley webinar. Should be a fun discussion about creating a playbook for restarting growth. It's no secret. It's kind of a tough time to be in staffing, tough time to be in a lot of industries right now. And we're going to have a little chat about some things you can do. And it's my pleasure to to welcome, let's try that again. I can recommend them too, to welcome Brad Biley and Rachel Reed to the webinar. We're going to be throwing around lots of ideas. Brad's going to be bringing in a lot of the people he's interviewed on our Secrets of Staffing Success Take the Stage podcast. And Rachel's going to be sharing a lot of very specific things she's been doing to help implement some of the ideas we're talking about. All right, guys, are you ready?
Let's do it. Let's go.
Okay. All right, so there's us. Before we get into the meat of the slides, take out your camera. This will be at the end, but take it out now. Take a picture of that QR code or write down smartideas.haleymarketing.com and mark your calendar for Tuesday, the 23rd of September, where we're going to be having our annual virtual conference. This is a once-a-year event, 7 hours of content, 14 presentations, new speaker every 30 minutes. Phenomenal ideas, and our theme this year is all about reimagining your staffing business. So sort of today's talk taken up on steroids, and you'll get a ton of content from some of the top speakers in the industry, as well as a bunch of people from our team on various aspects of your marketing to help you drive sales and improve recruiting. So we'll look forward to seeing you on the 23rd of September. That's a Tuesday.
David, attendees don't need to be there for the full 7 hours, right?
Oh, we don't tell them that's the end, but yeah, you're
Okay.
right. They don't have to be there for 7 hours. We do record everything. And the nice thing
Perfect.
about signing up is you're the first person to get the recording. All right, so we're going to jump in. Just a quick story that came to my mind as we were working on this. And it was about a staffing company owner just left me in awe. I'm sitting in the audience, like transfixed as this person's talking. And all I'm thinking about is, she's amazing. This is incredible. And to be honest, I'm actually a little bit jealous. And what this person's talking about is she's the CEO of a clerical staffing company. And she's talking about how she gets north of 100% markups on her services. And I was working in a clerical staffing business at the time I heard this. I'm like, there's no way. Like, we're averaging 52 and we think we're knocking it out of the park. And here she is over 100. And she talks about how she took a very mundane service, scanning documents, and she was doing it for legal reviews. And she just said, I'm not going to be in the staffing business. I'm actually going to create a service around document reviews. I'm going to have it as a project solution. And she did a lot of cool things where she would have the actual staffing hours required to do the work. She'd have the management required to supervise the work. She'd have the equipment required to do the scanning. And she built a pricing model that took all of those things together that in effect gave her north of 100% markup on all of the labor she was supplying. So she was still doing staffing, but when she went to the customer, she said, this is our price per foot. Boom. I was blown away. And when we're talking today, the reason I wanted to share this story is, the roller coaster ride is what we're all feeling in the industry. Everybody competing for right now a declining pie in the market that's out there. And so we're looking for how can we find ways to stand out, to differentiate, and to rethink the business that is staffing. So good news is it's not all bad news. So there's been some signs of life very recently, and these are literally headlines from last week. So recruiting firms eye growth despite the slow rebound. Atlantic International sees encouraging momentum. U.S. jobless claims edge lower. AMN sees July stabilization. U.S. staffing hours inch upward, remain at 2025 high. And you're not going to get too excited about this, but those green numbers on the right, that's the week over week results. And 1% up, 1.2% up, even 0.2% up. It's better than we've seen because you see the red, that's the year over year. We're still down, but we're trending in the right direction. And today we're going to figure out about how do you capitalize on where the industry is going. Because if you wait till things are better, that's really too late to take advantage of an improving economy. You need to start when things are starting to rebound. You need to build your visibility. You need to think about your business model so you are hitting the ground at full steam when your clients come on board saying, yeah, we need people. All right, so to figure out the future, start with the past. What really drove the decline in demand over the past 2 years? This has really been a complex time in the industry. We had, an all-time high in 2022. It was 3.2 million people working per day in temporary jobs. It was awesome, but it's declined about 20% since then. So what's happened? Well, part of it was we had this post-COVID surge, and this is just normalization. What goes up must come down. It can't stay up forever, and some of this is just normal cyclical stuff. And of course, interest rates are high, and that makes a lot of CFOs cautious about investing because if they have to borrow money to invest in capital projects, it makes those projects much more expensive. So they'll say, wait, I'm hearing, a lot of talk about we're trying to push the Fed to lower interest rates. Maybe we should wait a little bit before we invest. Then a lot of companies right-size their inventory, which caused a contraction in manufacturing, which caused a contraction in distribution because they were basically working down the inventories they had. And earlier this year, they were buying up inventory in expectation of tariffs, and now they're sitting on inventory that they can again work down. That's bad for staffing because they don't need a lot of people when they're sitting on the inventory they already have. They don't need to ship it anywhere. Then there was labor hoarding that happened. And a lot of staffing company clients said, you know what, it's really hard to find good people because of the shortages in 2021 and 2022. So he said, as we find good people, instead of sending back into the labor pool, going back to our staffing agency partners when we need to hire, we're going to bring more people on full time. And we're going to staff up our full time capacity because we need to keep the good people. So we're not dealing with this churn of talent and struggling to find quality people. Then we kind of had this another roller coaster. We had an easing of immigration for a while, which actually helped bring down the pay rates that kind of exploded in 2021. And we had an uptick in workforce participation that also meant we had more people in the market, which increases supply, decreases pricing, decreases some of the volatility in the market. But this year that's changing again. Now we're clamping down on immigration, which means we're going to have fewer people available to go to work. And I've heard labor force participation is dropping again. So for staffing, those two things actually should be positive trends, but I don't think they've really impacted the industry yet. Then you've got price sensitivity. Yeah, costs went up a lot because not so much staffing companies changed their pricing models. We didn't. But there was such incredible wage inflation from hourly jobs to salary jobs in 2021 and 2022 that the cost, when you add a markup in, the cost of using staffing services became really expensive, particularly in sectors like healthcare, which had the COVID crisis pricing. Now that sticker shock has created a backlash where people are saying, yeah, I got to find a cheaper way to do it. And unfortunately, they blamed our industry for the cost. They didn't look at supply and demand. Then there are structural buyer shifts. The bigger guys are saying, you know what, we're using so much temporary staffing that we should really look at direct sourcing and managing our own labor pools. We've seen this in the past. It happens. It tends to be cyclical. Companies will do it for a while themselves and they realize, you know what, this isn't our core business. And having to staff our own jobs actually isn't that efficient, especially when we have to do it across lots of geographic locations for bigger manufacturers or distribution companies. They tend to come back to staffing services, but while they're doing it themselves, it's painful. And then there's a bit of a regulatory whiplash as we've seen changes in how independent contractors are classified, and we've seen changes in employment law, and we've seen a lot of red versus blue state changes in the last 12, particularly the last 6 months. All of these regulatory issues make employers to say, time out. Let's just hold on until things get a little more stable because we're not sure what to do. And so all of these things add up to a lot of uncertainty in the market. And then there's one thing, yeah, overall job openings cooled because the economy did slow down from where it was 2 years ago. So if you add that all up, that's why we've lost 20% of the staffing jobs. That's why healthcare has been on a really ugly 2.5-year decline from its peaks in 2022. Now, just in case you think I'm really smart to come up with all these ideas, or Brad or Rachel are really smart, they are, but we didn't. We used our pal ChatGPT, and I know this is for the American Staffing Association. This is their AI and Staffing Week. So we thought we'd give you some of the tricks that we're using to get this kind of content. So here's the prompt that we used to figure out what was happening in the market, and just basically sit down with ChatGPT and had a discussion about the value of temporary services, what's happened over the past 2 years, and asking the AI, our chat partner, to be an expert business consultant and evaluate the root causes of decline. So, not a very complex prompt, no expertise prompt engineering here, but giving it a little context, giving it a little direction in terms of the things we know that have happened, and then asking it to probe further was a really effective trick to get a great list of causes of the downturn in the industry. And the nice thing is, I used ChatGPT 5 and it cited everything that it found. So we didn't have to worry about it making up facts and statistics. All right. But today, what we're really talking about is what do you do? Yeah, I know where the market is. How do we create that staffing sales playbook? So we're going to go through 4 lessons, 4 playbooks. Brad's going to give us a lot of color to these ideas, talking about some of the guests he's had on the podcast. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Rachel's going to jump in and show us how do you put these ideas into action. So the first one we're looking at is trying to figure out the most critical question right now that you need to ask to yourselves before you make a sales call. And that question is, why would an employer want or need to use staffing services right now? Demand is down. People are applying to jobs like crazy. It's easier to hire. What's the answer to that question? And Brett, I know you had some discussions on the show with Dan Morey
Yep.
about this issue. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Dan's a good friend of the program, good friend of Haley Marketing. And when he sat down on the show and we talked on Take the Stage, one of his main points is that we cannot simply compete on price. And when we think about what employers want or need, maybe I need to be the one that says, an employer doesn't need a staffing partner. They might want one, but we need to make sure that we're educating them on why they should use a staffing partner. And if we're just coming in trying to demand business, or cold calling, asking what orders are available, it's really just a race to the bottom if we're just competing on price. And David, I know you and Dan have sat down and talked about differentiating the sales process quite a bit. So I might even pitch it back your way. What are some things that you've learned in your conversations with Dan in that angle and that approach?
Well, to credit to Dan, we actually have a whole playbook coming up on
Sure.
differentiating the sales experience. But short answer to your question, it's really rethinking the value proposition.
Yeah.
So if and who I'm selling to. So if it's not just an employer. If I'm selling to the HR, their value they get out of working with me is actually different than if I'm selling to the plant manager. So the plant
Okay.
manager may be caring about things like throughput and what's my labor cost efficiency ratio. And they're going to be looking at performance metrics that are completely different than HR, which may be looking at time to fill. What's the quality rate? How easy are you to work with as a staffing provider? Do you make my job easier? That's not something you can show in a report, but
Yep.
that's what they really want to see is can I trust you to get it right and I trust you to do a better job than the current vendor because if HR is going to change staffing vendors, they're putting their neck on the line. So you have to think about for the employer, it's not just the employer, it's the buyer and what does each buyer want or need. And so it's one of the things, Dan and I
Yeah.
were talking about is how you have to really take that driving demand down to the next level.
Yeah, and that actually even enlightened me on another Dan that I talked to, Dan Fisher of the Menemsha Group. He talked about disarming the prospect when you're reaching out for a cold call, or disarming the prospect when you're reaching out for that conversation. If you're approaching every cold call the exact same, David, to your point, it's an uphill battle, right? You need to know who you're reaching out to, who you're prospecting with, so that you can have the right conversation at the right time with the right person. Because, David, your challenges on the day to day are very different than my challenges and are very different than Rachel's challenges. We have 3 different jobs in the business, and what we're doing is very different. So if someone's calling on us, they need to bring that to the conversation.
Yeah, and I'll share a little quick story that literally happened right before this.
Do you know another Dan?
No, not another Dan. I can't add another Dan to the mix, but I
All
have a
right.
Magazi to add to the mix.
Fair.
So
Two
in our
Dans and a
in
Magazi.
our sales meeting today, we were talking a little bit about strategies for the sales team to better use AI. I showed an example of something and I asked the people in the room, what are you doing that's really cool with AI? And Megezi said to me, he goes, you don't want to know. I'm like, which of course I want to know. So he's like, well, I'm using the AI as a spy to go spy on you, David. And I had it build a very detailed profile of you
Perfect.
and who you are and how you act and what you're all about. And then he just shared the report with me, and it was just like 20 pages of information about me, more than I knew about myself. And it wasn't 100% accurate, but it was about 97% accurate. To your point, Brad, if I'm thinking about who I'm calling on, I can use those exact same techniques to get really good information about who I'm about to call on before I pick up the phone. And I'm going to walk in. Got to be careful, folks, of using it too much because it'd be a little creepy if you know too much about people. But you can use it to frame really good questions to make sure you're positioning your value as a staffing partner in just the right way. So, yeah, I totally agree with what Dan 2 was recommending to you. All right, let's go on to our first playbook, which is giving people a reason to buy. So you really want to show how you can solve business problems, and to the point Brad just made, not just provide staffing services. Staffing's the tool. So right now, there's a problem with, in certain segments, labor shortages and access to talent. There's a problem everywhere with labor cost and inefficiency. We can't afford to be wasting time because we don't have money to burn. There's a problem with expertise gaps. We have the wrong skills for the jobs to be done, and we have people with time who don't have the ability to do the job. So that can be an upskilling opportunity or a top grading opportunity. We have to be driving productivity, eliminating bottlenecks, and accelerating project delivery. We have to be mitigating risks, whether it's the uncertainty in the world or it's employment liability that organizations have. As staffing companies, we have to come in as those co-employment partners. So let's get to our first playbook. And thanks again, ChatGPT, for not only coming up with great ideas, but designing our playbook. All right. So the first thing we're going to do before Rachel gets to like how do you implement this is think about three things: research, training, and outreach. So first thing, your ideal customers, your ICPs, ideal client profiles. We need to build a really good picture of these people. We need to understand the industries we're selling to and what's going on in those industries. We need to understand the specific companies we're selling to and what's going on in their world. We need to understand the buyers and their staffing challenges. And we need to understand our value. And that's all research we can do. Just like you saw with the prompt before, you can do it yourself with AI to do that research very quickly because we need to be armed with that information to do outreach that really fits the prospect. Then we need to train our team. If they're going to pick up the phone and make cold calls, if they're going to send email, if they're going to drop by and drop something off, who are the target personas, the specific buyers we're going after? And what do we say that resonates with each audience? Again, AI is a great tool to help you brainstorm who are these people. And as someone on our sales team recommended today, even have sample conversations so you can kind of practice talking to that decision maker before you ever even step in their office, pick up the phone. You've actually already rehearsed it with a synthetic version of your target client. And then we get to the marketing, creating the automation sequences to go after current and former clients because you already know them, you have a existing or past relation, and we can use automation tools to create great outreach to deeper engage current clients and re-engage former clients. And then we're going to build lead gen strategies for the cold prospects. And we're going to get to a whole segment later on lead gen. So I'll save it till then. And we're going to jump over right now to Rachel, who's going to show us some specific campaign ideas.
Yeah, so when thinking about, the people that you can reach the best and the people who are closest to the buying process, it's people that you've done business with in the past. Take a look at a list of all of the clients that you've billed within the past 12 months, and then how many of those clients have you not billed within the past 6 months? Those people are ripe for opportunity, and you can use automation to reach out to them because they know who you are, they know what you offer, they know your value, and you can take this opportunity to highlight anything that's new within your company. Has anything changed? Have you added a new service vertical? Have you reinvented your sales process? Is anything new within your company that might re-engage these past clients? and then provide some perspective on what's happening in the industry with them. You already have this relationship with them. They already know who you are. They already trust you. So kind of build upon that trust with some more perspective on things that are happening and what's specific to their business. But also highlight positions you've been filling. I've talked to a lot of clients that say that they, focus on high volume light industrial roles, but also offer accounting roles or admin roles. And a lot of companies don't know this. So highlight positions that you've been filling, highlight the verticals that you work in so you can kind of double down on what you can offer to these past clients. That might be different from the positions that you filled in the past.
And Rachel, before we go on to the next campaign idea, I just want to pardon the sales pitch, but this one just triggered a thought in my mind. We've been working with a small number of clients on a way to do more thought leadership content. So what we do with this service is we're actually doing a deep dive into the industries they're selling to, the issues going on in those industries. Then we find current topics that we can use as themes for content. Then we develop the thought leader topics from those themes. And through a combination of interviewing and AI and human writing, we create the thought leader concept. And that gives you the perspective on what's happening in the client's industry. It's great for the thought leader. It can be handed down to the sales team so they better understand the perspective of people they're selling to. So enough of sales pitch, but it ties in so well to this, to be getting that expertise and having it come from your team because it's a credibility builder for your staffing company. All right, back to you, Rachel.
And the second campaign is really cross-selling and upselling to your current or past clients. Like I mentioned, are you filling high volume roles for clients? Have you filled these high volume roles in the past, but you haven't filled, you have some, maybe different direct hire roles that would be great for their companies. This is a great opportunity to position yourself as, I can fill your high volume roles, your temp work, but I can also fill your direct hire roles. Here's a great accounting candidate that we have. You already have this relationship. You can use this opportunity to show your value and to really double down on the relationship that you've already created with these clients. And then something else that's not in here that I want to touch on based on Brad and David's conversation earlier with the sales process is a lot of conversations I'm having with clients right now focused on automation pays attention to the interactions that people are having with the content that they're sharing to help create that demand and create that better buying experience. So if you're posting things on LinkedIn and you're seeing people liking certain types of posts on LinkedIn, or if you're sending emails and you're seeing a lot of people engaging with certain types of emails, you can use that in your sales process. Like I saw Brad has engaged with all the emails that I've sent him based on turnover. When I talk to Brad, I know that the conversation that I want to have with him is going to be focused specifically on turnover. So just another idea that you can use kind of the touch points that you're sending and the conversations that you're having and the marketing that you're doing to kind of guide the conversations that you're having throughout the sales process.
Sergio, I have a question about this one, and I don't know if anybody's doing this or not. So I apologize if I'm throwing you a curveball. But is anybody really using the automation platforms or maybe AI to analyze their past buying experience to figure out when their former clients, when their current clients are most likely to see peaks and valleys in their demand so that they're reaching out in advance?
I don't think they're using automation for that. I think a lot of this is based on kind of what they know and what they expect and, things within their business, but that's a great data point to use moving forward. Like we've seen a ton of people answering our phone calls around this time when we're talking about this type of labor. That'll help guide our communication strategy moving forward.
Awesome, thanks. And we're going to get to in some of the future ideas some ways to look at projects that are upcoming, and some of those projects can have 1 or 2 year lead times. You can't be the staffing partner when they go to implementation. You have to be the staffing partner when they're planning the project 1 to 2 years in advance, which means sharpening your workforce planning skills and then using some of what Rachel's talking about here to reach out to those current and former clients to see what's in their pipeline, their time horizon. It may not be this year's seasonal demand for the holidays. It may be the new plant that they're building in 2 years. All right. So we're going to go to our second playbook. This one, borrowing from our pal Wayne Gretzky, go where the puck is headed. So, demand for traditional staffing services, as I mentioned twice, is down 20%. But where is demand going to be? So There are actually quite a few places where it's about to get better or is already getting better for demand for talent. So if you look at seasonal and high variability employers or industries, if you look at, here's the one, capital projects and infrastructure adjacencies, companies that are about to make big investments or are starting in the planning process for big investments, there's a big part of talent that goes into those investments. If you look at healthcare or outside of travel nursing, there's still a critical shortage of talent in all healthcare disciplines, and some, like locums, have continued to do very well the past couple of years as travel nursing fell off. But there's lots of other segments of the industry where there are opportunities for growth. AI-driven jobs that require AI skilled talent. I was just looking at the agenda for staffing role, and I think 100% of the sessions had the letters AI in them. I've never seen a conference where everything had AI in it, but if you're in staffing, you're in recruiting, you understand this is the reality of the world we're in. Is AI is changing our business, but it's changing our clients' business too. And some jobs require talent that's very proficient in AI and can use the staffing say, hey, I can help you get that kind of talent with those skills. Industries with chronic skill shortages, we'll take a look at some of those in a second. Industries that will be positively impacted by AI. There's all this doomsday talk about AI eating jobs, but there also going to be new jobs created, and they're already being created for those organizations that are looking for the opportunities to fill them. All right, so yes, this is a big ugly chart. You can get the slides at lunchwithhaley.com because you're probably not going to write this all down. I won't be on this slide long enough. But again, my buddy Chat helped us take a look at where we can create opportunities. So we looked at industries with skill shortages, healthcare delivery and support, physicians, skilled trades, cybersecurity, education, industries with AI opportunities, AI infrastructure and data centers, semiconductors, clean energy and grid modernization, biopharma and life sciences, advanced manufacturing and robotics. And then kudos to ChatGPT. It decided to find the cross section. It named them the gold zone that are both high demand and AI opportunities. And it said, okay, if we look at the gold zone, data systems and power ecosystem, semiconductor fabrication plants, clean energy, healthcare ops with AI assist, cybersecurity for regulated industries. And then it actually said why it matters and example roles. Again, you can get this slide from the Lunch with Haley website where you can download the deck because you want to think about just not who's going to be hiring, but what kinds of positions will they be hiring for? What are the opportunities for staffing, either on the temporary or the direct hire side? All right, we promised some bonus tips. So here's the next prompt. So we actually went through the first prompt, all of the reasons staffing dropped, and started to ask questions about, okay, what are some smart strategies to drive sales in the current market? Gave it some examples to use as a starting point, and then asked the AI specifically for what it would recommend. And the chart you just saw came out of that discussion with ChatGPT. And you'll kind of notice the theme to our AI tips. They're not really about being brilliant prompters. They're about having back and forth dialogue, asking questions, getting responses, asking deeper questions so that you get to the information that's really useful for the problem you're trying to solve. In this case, what industries to target. Okay, and then we came back to the playbooks and we actually asked ChatGPT to help us create some of these playbooks and to specifically make that table with the list of industries with talent shortages and where AI would be beneficial. All right, so our second playbook. Now, I feel like we were cheating on the top of this one because we actually repeated the headline, but this is really the same. Creating demand and finding opportunity. I got to start with research, training, and outreach, but this time it's a little bit different. So research is about, I have to do the research, my local market, if I'm a staffing firm that works geographically focused, or my target industry if I work in a vertical focus. Who's going to be hiring? What size companies? What industries? What skill disciplines? What roles do I need to sell to? Then again, train the team. This is getting deeper into those buyer personas. They need to understand every buyer they're going to be on the phone with and what motivates those buyers, how they're being measured, what problems they're trying to solve, what opportunities they're trying to win over, how they're going to be measured by their boss. And then get down to the messaging. How do we talk to those people? How do we speak in their language and then at the same time show them the value proposition of staffing? How do we explain our company's key differentiators in a way that adds value for the buyer we're selling to? And again, we're getting to this. I think it's the next one. We'll get into the specific lead gen strategies. But once we've done our research and training, now we're going to build outreach strategies to go after these prospects who are going to be hiring. And whether it's a current client or a former client, we're going to be using similar lead gen techniques. Again, more in just a minute. But Rachel, you do have some ideas for us here on how we can use automation.
There are some tools out there. One tool that I really like and that we use a lot at Haley Marketing is Apollo.io. And the coolest part of this tool is that you can use it to find companies that are hiring positions that you can fill. So you can literally run a search and say, you know, I have a software engineer or I have a plant manager role that I'm looking to fill, and it'll pull up all of the companies that have that job posting within a certain time frame in a certain location. And I think this is a really cool way, rather than, you know, reaching out to your target list and saying, are you hiring? Do you have any needs right now? Let's talk about your needs right now. Messaging that really doesn't break through the noise. This is a good way to say, I see that you're hiring this position. I have a great XYZ candidate that fills all of these needs. When can we talk about them? It really lets you get super specific with the need that you can fill, rather than just being generic and hoping and kind of putting the ball in their court to respond to you. And then when you're using outreach, it's always important to think about meeting your buyers where they're at, using a mix of email, LinkedIn, and phone, physical drop-offs, drop-in visits, mail, different ways that you can reach your prospects. Because if you're thinking about, you know, a lot of people are leaning into email now, and think about a plant manager that receives 500 emails a day from people that are pitching the same services that you do or other services that they don't really want to talk about. At the end of the day, they're going through that email inbox and your message is probably not going to break through the noise. But if you drop in and you request a conversation with that plant manager and they see you face to face, that'll go a lot farther than just an email that says, you know, let's talk about your hiring strategy. And then another way to reach people is to open the door, use resources to open the door. Rather than a message that's just like, hey, can we talk about your hiring process? Let's talk about what's happening in the industry right now. Providing resources that speak to them is a good way to open the door, with hiring data, with industry insights, with success stories, with any type of content that you can give them that kind of speaks to their business. A document that says how a hospitality company reduced time to fill by 50% using these strategies is going to go a lot farther than, let's talk about your hospitality hiring process. And then when we're thinking about the type of content that you present, kind of think beyond the old school, you know, white papers, ebooks, downloads, and we're shifting more into more interactive pieces, more personalized pieces like calculators or quizzes or assessments or something that can provide the buyers more specific information related to their business, rather than just a generic white paper that they know that everyone else that you're reaching out to is getting.
Brad, I think we might have a little bit later, but this is kind of a good place to talk a little about some of the guests you've talked to about um, the outreach piece. And I was thinking
Yeah.
about the first one there, and using the Apollo. So I've got a list, I can send out stuff, but you know, everybody's inbox. Rachel, you said it. Your inbox is just stuffed. Like as soon as you said that, I had a little heart palpitation as I'm thinking about, oh, my email is shut off right now. So my box is filling up, and within the hour that we'll be together here, I will probably have at least 50 new emails that came in during this hour, many of whom are from people trying to sell me some product or service. So, Brad, some of the guests you've talked to, how do they deal with that?
Yeah, so two come to mind. The first, very good friend of the program, Tom Erb. I had him on a little while ago, and he talked about how we need to be seen as a trusted advisor, not as a necessary evil. Too much of the industry and too many staffing and recruiting firms are stereotypically seen as a necessary evil. The client tries to fill the order by themselves for an extended period of time. They can't. They try again. They can't. I guess I'll call David staffing firm. I guess I'll post the job and see if somebody can help me out, right? We're a necessary evil. But if we're seen as a trusted advisor, and Tom has this A to E hierarchy to go from necessary evil to trusted advisor, if we're seen as a trusted advisor, well, then David, certainly those emails cut through the clutter. Rachel, those drop bys cut through the clutter. Those tangible print pieces cut through the clutter because at that point, and David, I know you just said you probably got 50 emails in the 34 minutes we've been on this call. I would assume there's probably two to three, though, even if they are from somebody trying to sell to you, you will still read them. You still trust that person enough that you value their opinion, even though you're not doing business with them yet. That person is at a completely different level than the what would be necessary evil who is just trying to get your attention. So whenever I hear a slide like this or I have a conversation like this, I go back to how can the average sales rep or recruiter or person running a split desk or owner position themselves as a trusted advisor and a consultant instead of a necessary evil.
Yeah, like that. You're exactly right. There's going to be a couple in the inbox, and the ones that are going to stand out are the ones that um, don't sound spammy,
Mm-hmm.
aren't a sales pitch, but actually are offering a solution to problem. And then the ones that probably going to get me the most is that I'm going to go there, and I shouldn't even say this out loud. I'm going to go there to social media and probably see an ad targeting me
Yep.
with the same message, not a sales pitch, but a solution to a problem. Because now I'm seeing it in a couple of places and my brain is connecting the dots.
Yep. Yeah,
Uh,
and that's exactly right. I think the more that you have that surround sound marketing, as we've referred to it a couple times here, the better, right? One message in one email is not going to be enough. We need to make sure that we're hitting prospects in multiple ways, unique ways, not spamming them, but doing it strategically so that there is that sort of, David, we talk about this on Monday's episode coming out next week. There's repetition and there's trust and loyalty that comes with repetition.
yeah.
So tease an episode that's coming out next Monday.
Awesome. Thanks, Brad. And this is actually a great segue because our third playbook is about differentiating your sales process. What Brad and I talked about, or we alluded to that Dan Morey really professes, is how do you make your sales experience different for the buyer than the next company's sales experience and the other 75 staffing companies you market sales experience. So here we're looking at lead generation strategies or sales enablement strategies. Choose your favorite wording. One I love, it's referred to as shock and awe. It's not our term. I believe it was from Dan Kennedy, who's a renowned copywriter and one of my favorite authors, but it's AIDA, attention, interest, desire, action. It's the attention, doing something that is so over the top that you are 100% certain to get the attention of the buyer and get them excited about what you're doing. I remember there was an example of a company that was trying to sell to Bob Evans, and Bob Evans is known for having a white mailbox in front of their restaurants. And so this company bought the same white mailbox. And inside they put a tape or cassette recorder and they put a sticker on it with a word that said play. And they mailed that out to someone. And when you press the button, somebody speaking in a comforting Southern accent talked about how delicious brownies at Bob Evans could be. And that they thought about the impact of brownies on the Bob Evans franchise chain and said, we didn't think it was that important because it's really only about 7 cents. And we didn't think 7 cents was going to be impactful to you. So we realized that that 7 cents was the lift on every share of your stock. So this company had done its analysis. It did this mailing someone a mailbox, tape recorder inside. It costs hundreds of dollars to go after this prospect. But the impact, they got to the decision maker, a financial decision maker in a senior level, and they talked the language. You're going to impact the valuation because you put brownies in my restaurant. They got the opportunity to make the sale with a great marketing campaign. Then we're going to get next to Rachel's favorite, sales funnel automation and integrated direct marketing. But it's really persona-led problem-first campaigns, knowing the specific buyers, focusing on problems, using multi-channel, multi-step outreach to do those 17 to 20 touches or more that it takes to actually get a B2B prospect willing to speak with your salesperson. Then there's account-based marketing, ABM. And I apologize for all the acronyms, but it's marketers, we can't help it. Where you're now saying for each company we're going after, we're going to identify all of the relevant decision makers. We're going to take our marketing campaign. Maybe we've designed a sales funnel automation or integrated direct marketing but we're going to personalize it for that specific organization and each individual buyer. So it feels like one-to-one direct marketing. Again, multi-step, multi-channel, integrating lots of ways to get someone's attention with the salesperson making calls, highly targeted. Then nurturing. I think this part often gets forgotten because people tend to think, well, the salesperson's making calls, that's good enough. And they said call back in 3 months, so we'll call back in 3 months. And then you call back in 3 months, like, oh, I'm so sorry. We just went with ABC Staffing because they were here last week. We need high value, consistent communication to all the relevant stakeholders to keep you top of mind. We don't want to annoy people by calling too much, but we want to be very professionally persistent, very supportive, constantly making deposits into the bank account that one day we hope to make a withdrawal from. If we do that consistently, we're differentiating ourselves from the competitors who are mostly call, put it in the calendar, call again in 3 months. Then getting found. Are we using digital marketing, search engine optimization, the AI optimization, or AEO or GEO? Pick your acronym. But essentially, we're all now using chat as a way to search, or we're searching on Google and we're seeing the AI summary, and we're not going any further. We just had a really nice message from a client yesterday saying we just got a new client because they were in ChatGPT doing a search, and our company was recommended in the search they were doing, and they bought from us. Thanks, Haley Marketing, for helping with the SEO work. But you need to be thinking about, how do we show up? SEO is becoming more and more important, but AI is changing the game. And then there's paid advertising. How do we get to the top of the results? How do we show up in social? How do we target the right decision makers? How do we stay top of mind? We can use PPC, paid advertising, to do all of that. Automation. You saw examples from Rachel already, dormant clients. We can also use it to go after placed talent. Somebody we placed a while ago is once again either going to be in the job market, or maybe they've moved up and now they're a potential client that really has a great relationship with your company. So dig into your ATS and go after those people you placed 3, 4, 5 years ago. Doing very personalized, targeted skill marketing. So we're sending the right candidates to the right employers, or doing targeted seasonal outreach, kind of as the example I asked Rachel about, knowing when a prospect or a client is most likely to buy, and making sure we're reaching out in advance of those needs. So our playbook for lead gen. Step 1 is document your current sales playbook, then reinvent it. So what are you doing now for prospecting, lead qualification, the discovery calls, making presentations, your closing process? Do you have a playbook that you've already written out? Have you just a bullet list of what do we do as an organization, every aspect of our current sales process? I would tell you the next step is to burn that. But really, how do we improve that? How do we create a new playbook? Are we doing problem-first plans to targeted buyer personas? Are we creating wedge offers, things that can open the door, because it's not a buy from me offer, it's a here's something for you offer. Let's get the conversation started. Can we improve how we're communicating by giving our team better talk tracks they can use in email, LinkedIn messaging, calls, in-person meetings? Are we looking at new approaches to pricing models? You'll see some of those in just a minute. Can we have a simple scorecard so the sales team knows, yeah, this is a great prospector. No, this is somebody we shouldn't spend too much time with. And then can we as a business make sure we're tracking our staffing performance metrics, the metrics that will matter to our target buyer, so we can show the buyers we're really good at solving the problems you have. And then you define your go-to-market plan, your automation sequences, your lead gen strategy, your land and expand strategy. When we get the client, we're going to get in and through the first job order, but how do we make sure we knock it out of the park and then grow the relationship? What's the account management plan? All right, Rachel, turning it back to you. Let's give us some ideas on how to do this stuff.
First idea is to avoid the spray and pray method. I will preach against spray and pray until the day that I die. A lot of companies anymore are just saying, I got this list of 10,000 contacts. I'm going to send the same message to all of them and see what happens. That doesn't work. I think everyone has seen that doesn't work. So getting segmented with your outreach and learning about who your buyers are, what their pain points are, where's the best place to reach them, really helps you make sure that your communication is in the right lane, rather than saying, I'm going to take a huge list and then just see what happens with this list. I had a conversation with a client the other day. Their two targets are plant managers and HR teams. Well, the way that you would talk to someone in HR is very different than the way that you talk to someone that's a plant manager. The pain points that they have are very different. Brad mentioned it earlier. The pain points that David has are very different from the pain points I have. So if you're sending both of us the same message, the chances it probably won't land. So make sure that you're taking the time to understand your audience and segment your audience, and then define your outreach based on what those pain points are. And then when you're doing your touch points, I mentioned it earlier, email, it's becoming really hard to break through the noise in email. So making sure that you're incorporating different types of touch points into your outreach is really, really important. I'm not saying give up on email. I think email is still a really important channel. It's one of the highest ROI channels, but you don't want to put all of your eggs in the email basket. You want to make sure that you're using direct mail, you're using LinkedIn, you're using phone reach in addition to your email to make sure that you're meeting your contacts where they're at, but also where they're most likely to convert. Someone could be opening and reading all of your emails, but aren't taking the time to respond to them, but they will pick up the phone when you give them a call and have a conversation based on all the content that you sent them. And then thinking about how many touch points it takes to convert a prospect. In the past, it could have been 5 to 10 touch points, it could have been 10 to 12 touch points. Anymore, I've heard upwards of 50 to 70 touch points to convert a prospect. So don't think about, I sent 4 emails, no one responded to my emails, I'm giving up. Think about, okay, how many touches that can I have on different channels that cover that whole 50 to 70 touch point process. It's getting longer, a lot more people are involved. So making sure that you're reaching all of those people in as many places as possible is really important. And then thinking about a touch point is not always a phone call or an email or direct one-to-one outreach. A lot of the touch points are someone seeing your brand on social media, someone seeing an ad somewhere, someone doing research, someone visiting your website. So don't think about, oh, I have to send 50 to 100 emails or I have to make 50 to 100 phone calls to cover this whole process. Think about the different places that people can see your brand and can recognize what you offer to kind of cover that whole buying process.
And Rachel, as I was reading this slide, I got inspired to go dig into the Haley Marketing archives, and I went deep and I looked because I've seen this trend towards digital, 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 which has been going on for 5 to 7 years. But at one time, I was going to say not that long ago, but actually it is pretty long ago, we saw a lot of people that really tried to find ways up front to differentiate. So we've talked about mail a couple of times. And I want to show you some examples of campaigns that I dug out of the Haley Marketing archives, just to maybe a little inspiration for everybody watching. So, sequences of postcards, greeting cards, where you tell your story and you break it into pieces. So this campaign that you see on screen goes through a variety of different reasons why someone should use staffing right now. It kind of deals with all of the preconceived notions somebody might have. So you can think about all the objections you get and say, we could design a campaign to proactively address all those objections. So as we're getting piece after piece after piece, we're making our case while we're keeping ourselves top of mind of why we'd be a great partner. Then I've got one that's just pure silliness. You take a pain point the client has and you figure out a way to create an analogy and you make something really stand out. That's a 9-inch tall stuffed donkey. Okay, this is ancient campaign because we don't see people willing to invest in the A in ADA. But this is the kind of stuff that really stands out to get somebody's mind share. You open this box, you read because hiring is a pain in the ass. You're smiling because it's silly. You're wondering who the heck is this from? And you've got now the person's eyes, ears, mind thinking about what you have to say for the next 30 seconds that they read that card. And now if you time that with the digital marketing, the email, the outreach, the LinkedIn, you're much more likely to have the digital work. And then one that I thought was super fun is we had a client where we said we really want to show the value of staffing and we want to do it in a very unique way. So we reimagined a series of famous movies as if they were staffing promotions. And every one of these was actually a poster size print that they put into a tube and they sent out or dropped off. Just a really fun way to illustrate the value proposition of staffing in a way that gets someone's attention. And when we talk about differentiating the sales process, think about a cold call versus a 9-inch tall stuffed donkey or a series of posters coming in the mail. Yes, it's more expensive, but you have a limited number of prospects to go after in the market, and you have to make sure you're doing what it takes to break through the clutter of the 50 emails that come in every hour.
David, I also think that when you send a 9 inch tall stuffed donkey and it has your brand name on it, XYZ Staffing, and they see that and they recognize that, and then you call them and they say, "Hey, it's David from XYZ Staffing," they're going to make the connection in their mind and say, "Wait a minute, this is the same guy who sent me this donkey that I really liked. I'm going to have a conversation with him," because you already have that awareness. So that piece kind of makes the digital more effective, like David said, because they're more likely to recognize your brand when you send them something that's memorable.
Yeah, and you also said something key there, like they liked it. So it's hard with an email to create a positive emotional connection. With a physical, tangible item, it is actually easier to create an emotional connection. And staffing, no matter how scientific our industry gets, it's still a relationship business. It's still a, do I trust you? Do I like you? Because then I'm going to give you an opportunity to sell to me. And that is part of that differentiating your sales process is building the likability. All right, let's get to our last playbook before we run out of time. So last one's probably the biggest, most strategic, which is reinventing your service delivery model. So think beyond selling temp help and direct hire. So maybe you'll think about, hey, we're not an MSP, but we could have some of like an MSP light. We could help clients co-manage their staffing program. Maybe we could get in direct sourcing as a service where we build private talent pools for clients. They're paying us to build the pool, but they get the benefit as they reuse those candidates. We charge a much lower market for redeployment. Maybe we can think about payrolling or employer of record solutions for their casual hires, interns, seasonal staff. Maybe we should look at more on-site programs with embedded teams, not just to manage staffing, but to manage safety, to manage performance. How about light versions of statement of work? That example I gave you, the story from the very beginning of selling scanning by the foot, you're pricing against units of output. How about getting into recruitment marketing? You're already experts at recruiting. So why not jump over and say, you know what? We can help your talent acquisition team with all areas of recruitment marketing. Maybe you'd partner with somebody who has the agency services because you're not going to get into developing branding, but you certainly can get into developing sourcing, talent evaluation. So it's sort of you're doing recruitment marketing. You might be even getting into some RPO kinds of services. But what you're doing is you're helping them deal with their candidate supply challenges because not every job they're trying to hire for is going to go to a staffing agency. So if I can help them with more of the jobs, I'm going to get more of the jobs that would go to a staffing agency. And maybe if you're in healthcare, building the float pools that you can help them for those last minute needs and be really good at managing and maintaining the talent in those pools. I know somebody who is in industrial staffing who would actually have the version of a float pool where they had last minute needs. They had a pool that came in every morning and it was sort of like inventory. They were available until they ran out for companies that had no call, no show, and just needed somebody in a pinch. And then staffing platforms, they're becoming more and more popular. So could you do one that's for your local market and online staffing platforms? There's more and more tools in the market. We just had a great conversation with Staff Up app it's one of the things they do. And could you use that to build a local staffing platform or picking a vertical or a very specific skill discipline that you have the recruiting into the pool and the employers can use it as more of a self-service model? And getting more into other levels of solution, moving up the value chain into talent management and workforce solutions, whether that's human consultants or a combination of human and AI-driven solutions to help people manage talent more effectively. So last week in a newsletter I get from a guy named Hung Lee that talks about all things recruiting, he had this little graphic. I will not read you the little graphic, but this is what an HR person does. These are all the job functions. The light green are things that are going to stay human. The dark green, most of this, are things that are going to become AI powered. So this has got to be terrifying if you're in HR. But at the same time, if you're in staffing, you have to understand this is what your HR managers are facing. Where can you help them maximize their skills in the human side? Where can you help them be more successful? Where can you maybe partner with companies that do the AI because you don't have to build it? You can partner to bring them in and they can bring you into their clients so you can help HR evolve as you're providing more value as a staffing partner. And speaking of AI, so look at your own business. Where can we automate our workflows? Sales, job order intake, sourcing, screening, matching, etc. I know ASA, this is AI week. I know Staffing Industry Analysts has their Collaboration X, I believe is the name, conference coming up in a few weeks in Dallas, where they're talking to all the AI vendors. I know it's overwhelming, but it's also going to be essential to compete, as essential as your ATS to automate those workflows. How about re-engineering your cost model? As you drive the cost of delivery down, your clients are going to want a piece of that savings. So it's time to think about now what piece you're going to be willing to give up. And then again, passing some of that savings to your clients where you control it, not where the purchasing department is demanding 99.99% of the savings, or 101% if it's really purchasing. All right, Brad, before we move on to the next slide, I know you had a great talk with Trisha
Yep.
Tamkin about all things AI and recruiting and staffing. So just want to share a few pointers
Yeah.
from that.
One of my favorite conversations. So AI is truly limitless, right? If we think about ChatGPT and the use case of what we can use something like ChatGPT for, AI for, the use case is limitless. So Trisha's model that she presented on the podcast was, how can AI help me in insert task here? And it's literally a sticky note that she had on her screen for a while. I actually just saw her at the NAPS annual conference back last month. And she said it's no longer on her screen, but it was for about a year. And I think it's a great framework to control your thoughts, control what it is that you can control as it relates to AI, and most importantly, block out the noise and block out the clutter. So how can AI help me in insert task here? Focus on that, use it to help you with that task, and forget about the rest for now. Focus on one element, otherwise you're going to get overwhelmed. And if you get overwhelmed, you're not going to do anything.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right, I apologize for moving a little quick. We got about 4 minutes left and a few
No
slides to
screws.
go. Let's make sure we get them. So let's get to our last playbook. Your new business models. This is find a problem, solve a problem. So if you see the problems your clients are facing, don't just think it's a temporary staffing problem. How can you help? What problems are you having? What could you do to solve them using recruiting, talent management, other elements of your expertise as a solution to the problem? Then you develop your new solution. It could be a new service line, it could be a new product or service deliverable, it could be a new delivery model, it could be new pricing. Then you're going to define your go-to-market plan. Once we have our solution, we got to test it. So we want to beta test it with a few very friendly clients like, hey, we want a way we can solve a problem for you. Can we experiment? We'll try it. We'll give you a great deal. And then once we've figured it out, we'll formalize how it works. You perfect the model over time, how you'll do the service delivery, what the value proposition is, how to price it. And then you go back to our lead gen solutions from Playbook 3 and you think about, how do I now sell this solution using some of those lead gen techniques, but now I have something really unique to offer. You're going to reinvent your service delivery model. And here's what some companies are already doing. They're changing their products, statement of work, consulting, MSP services. They're changing their pricing. I've seen fractional recruiters, subscription models, outcome-based pricing, changing a distribution strategy, online staffing platforms. So it doesn't have to be me sending a salesperson out to sell and a recruiter interviewing a candidate in the office to deliver. I can use online staffing maybe to deliver anywhere. We also see our more staffing companies getting into the world of domestic, nearshore, and offshore talent. And at least one big staffing company said we're also going to supply AI agents. Okay, let's wrap it up with our final 2 minutes. Creating the playbook for your company. So we showed you a lot of stuff in the last hour. The final piece of advice here is do less, but do it better. Don't try to boil the ocean. So the playbook for your business is evaluate all your options. Go back through the slides, listen to the recording, brainstorm with your team. What can we do to generate demand? Where can we find opportunity? How can we differentiate our sales process? Should we create new business models? If so, what might they be based on the problems we can solve? And then pick one. Focus on your best opportunity. Don't try to do everything. All right, that wraps up this Lunch with Haley webinar. I want to remind you again about a couple of things. We've got 3 final slides. Number 1, if you didn't sign up for the Smart Ideas 5 Summit, that's coming up in less than a month. So sign up, go to smartideas.haleymarketing.com or take a picture of that QR code. Number 2, you need more sales ideas and you have not already been part of our 30 sales ideas in 30 days, you can go to haleymarketing.com/30 30 sales ideas, or just take a picture of the QR code. Again, it'll be in the slides you can download. And Brad, I'll let you do this one because you got some great stuff coming up for the podcast.
Absolutely. Every other week, I have the opportunity to sit down with one of the industry's leading consultants to talk about what they're doing and what they're seeing as they relates to the staffing and recruiting industry. If you're not subscribed to the Secrets of Staffing Success on your preferred podcast player, I would encourage you to do so. Or you can watch every episode by checking out Haley Marketing on YouTube. As David mentioned, Smart Ideas 5 is coming up. Most of the presenters on Smart Ideas 5 have also been on Take the Stage. Rochelle Carrington, I know Ben Mena, I know Joey Frampus. David, I'm probably forgetting a couple others, but fantastic lineup. And again, if you want to learn a little bit more, you can check out Take the Stage by looking for Secrets of Staffing Success or subscribing to the Haley Marketing YouTube channel.
And that brings us to the very final slide. I know we covered a lot. We went fast. If there are questions, if you need help, just reach out. I'm happy to chat. Brad's always happy to chat. Rachel, if we can ever get her to find a free minute, is always happy to chat. But we are happy to give lots of advice to help you find better ways to drive your sales, to build the playbook that's going to work for your business in the current economy and as you look forward to the rest of 2025. From the three of us, I want to say thank you very much for being part of today's webinar. And we look forward to seeing you next month, not on Lunch with Haley, but at our Smart Ideas Summit. Take care.